Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the Talent Company's webinar today. Today's webinar will be moderated by Janice Gabry of the Talent Company and will introduce our exceptional panel of senior leaders to discuss the new career transition in the age of COVID. My name is Marian Tripp, and I am the Customer Engagement Experience Manager with the Talent Company. As many of you know, and for those who may not, the Talent Company is an HR consulting organization focused on recruitment, leadership and talent development, total rewards, career transition, and HR services on demand. Before we get started, I'd just like to go over some housekeeping items with you. Today's webinar is scheduled to last 1 hour, including Q&A. All participants will be muted to enable the facilitators and leader guests to present without interruption. Questions can be submitted via the chat at the bottom of your screen at the start of the Q&A portion of today's session. Technical questions can be submitted via the chat as well, directly to the Talent Company events. I will be producing in the background, and I will be happy to respond to you directly. You will receive the facilitators' handouts, the session recording, and evaluation survey within 2 days. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Janice Gabry. Janice Gabry is the Vice President of Client Experience and Executive Engagement at the Talent Company. Janice is a career coach and client connector since joining the Talent Company in 2017. She coaches clients through their job search, as well as advises and supports HR leaders when going through a change in an organization. She is a trusted partner with customers and clients alike. Please join me in welcoming Janice and the executive leaders this morning.
Thank you very much, Marian, for this lovely introduction, and welcome everyone for joining us today. Thank you for attending on a beautiful snowy day, but I want you to know just how important you are to me. Not only did I shower, I did my hair and put on a sports jacket, and you'll be seeing that in just a minute. And the reason I bring this to mind and creating some lightness is we're going to be talking about a topic that's sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes difficult, and it's tough situations to go through. From the HR person's point of view, delivering the message as well as that employee receiving the message, which is why it is so important we talk about it. So, with an amazing group of people I'll be introducing in just a moment, we're going to talk about career transition and outplacement, interchanging those words, by the way, and how it supports the terminated employee and equally the organization. So we're going to talk about what is career transition, purpose, is the delivery and the service different with COVID? And then how do you choose a good partner when it comes to supporting your exiting employees? We're going to have Q&A and we're going to wrap it up. I would ask, if it's okay, please, there are going to be so many great questions throughout this session. If we could save up your questions in the chat box to arrive upon the period of Q&A, the reason being is we will have sometimes questions come in that may be answered, or your great question might be buried because it was put in really early, and then I, have to get really technical and scroll through. And it will be just nice to focus on these fantastic panelists and hear what they have to say. So, with that being said, let me introduce you to our panelists today. First off, welcome Maura Richardson, our Chief People Officer of Vet Strategy, and she heads up HR for a company that manages vet practices on behalf of vet partners. In other words, she loves people and animals, and she's led HR with some of the biggest retail CPG brands. She partners with culture, people, and all-around teams, bringing business and personality together. I've been so fortunate of meeting her over the last few years and having a business and friendship brought together in business. Secondly, Rolando Lopez, welcome, Senior Director, Talent Strategy, Loblaw Companies, an organization well known because they feed us and keep us healthy. He builds teams, people, culture. He's a great talent guy. And I've had the opportunity to meet him over the past year or so, and truly an authentic, caring, and tenacious I would say HR person, but more importantly, I group him in with friend and grateful that you are also here with us today. And last but not least, Erica Mendonça da Silva, Senior Career and Employment Strategist with us, the Talent Company, also known as Rockstar Career Coach. She moves people forward. She builds self-confidence, motivation, focus, and brings out the best in them. And I should know this because, yes, we have worked together for a very long time, over 25 years. And so I certainly know how she brings people together and forward. So with that said, I am going to bring us all into the picture. Welcome everyone to the session.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janice.
Wonderful. So as we kick off today, as all of you know, I have some great questions for you, and from the participants that are listening in, appreciating your knowledge and experience when it comes to career transition, when it comes to terminations. Whether we like it or not, conducting terminations are part of a business and how it changes. And with that, some tough decisions are made. And as that HR partner in the business, it is so important that we work with the organization on a whole through these difficult situations. So I did a brief introduction of each of you, but what I thought I would just throw out to let you kick off, if there's anything additional you want to share about yourself and your role, and kick off with why outplacement is important and why you're here, which again, so grateful. So Maura, I'll start with you today.
Sure. Thanks, Janice. Yeah, so as Janice said, I lead the people team for a Canadian organization that owns and operates animal clinics across Canada. And for me personally, when Janice reached out about this topic, I think there's two key reasons why outplacement and transitions is near and dear to my heart. I think first and foremost, how you join a company is as important as how you leave a company. And so for me, Janice, you just talked about like those difficult decisions that have to happen. What we can control is how we help the person in their move on to the next piece. And that is within our control. Sometimes those decisions that get us to that point aren't within our control, but the fact of what we can control is how we help them get to next. That's probably the first reason why the topic is near and dear to my heart, because that's really what it's about, is helping people find the next best thing for them. Secondarily, on a personal note, I've experienced being in transition. I think it's made me a better HR leader, a more thoughtful HR leader, because you can think you know what it feels like, but until you're actually in that position, you don't know. And so for me, I'm deeply tied to the value it brings because I know firsthand how important it is.
That's fantastic. And I thank you for sharing. I think it's amazing. You're bringing so much to this because you've got experiences you've said on all sides. So thanks for kicking us off. I'm going to go over to Rolando now. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks, Janice, and hi, everyone. So I'm not going to go through my my background. I think you guys can creep me out on LinkedIn, but what I will say is that I am a talent management specialist. I've worked for very large organizations and also small, mid-sized companies as well. And in my role as a talent management expert, I've done a lot of different stuff in terms of the talent management domain, from learning and development, succession, performance, all that kind of stuff. But it's also afforded me the opportunity to work on specific initiatives in many of the companies worked on, right? So I've been involved in mergers and acquisitions and acquiring, for example, when I was at Bayer, I was part of the team that helped acquire Monsanto. I was involved in transformational initiatives where there was restructuring involved. I was in PE-backed pre-IPO organizations that started to tank. And we had to quickly, develop a strategy to, keep business afloat while managing talent. In a lot of these specific projects that I was working on, outplacement or the exiting of good talent was a necessary strategy. So from a business perspective, I saw strategically how you do it. because if you don't do it properly, you're going to lose engagement and lose the objectives of your projects. So that's from a one perspective. Like Maura, I too myself was also involved in my own career transition. And I'll say that while unpleasant, I thought it was also a great learning opportunity to see the other side. It's to Maura's point, you gain more perspective, compassion, all those kinds of things. But I also saw it as an opportunity to be a mystery shopper in the area of outplacement, because I knew most likely I'll come back in some sort of role where I'll most likely be responsible for those kinds of things. And I actually number one, I have worked with a talent company from that perspective, but I also through that time got to learn and understand the other inner workings of other organizations as well. So I formulated for myself a perspective of the right organizations, the right kind of things people go through based on my own personal experience.
Thank you, Rolando. And I love that. And that is something we're going to even be talking about, of what are those differentiators and how can that make a difference to the end user, as we call it. So thank you for sharing that. And Erica, welcome as our executive career coach and strategist. So why is outplacement important in your words?
Well, first of all, thank you, Janice, for inviting me today. I'm really delighted to be here to talk from the other side of it and really give it a bit of a different perspective. I think what's really important, and the two executives on the call have already stated that, the importance of ensuring, as Maura said, that you don't just take care of individuals as they're onboarding. I think it speaks really well to your brand as you're exiting them as well. So, happy to be here today to talk about not just from introducing us if we're available on site, but taking individuals right through the process. So my role really is to ensure that the individuals going through our process, that it's a great experience for them, that we are connected to them. But most importantly, my role is to help them move forward and articulate their brand narrative through various modems, whether it's online or whether it's on paper. So thanks for having me here today.
Thanks, Erica. And boy, you brought up such an important point we will be speaking to as well, that whole connection piece. As the four of us speak to a wonderful audience through a screen of 2 by 3 inches, each of our faces. So what a time we're in, and how our services have had to evolve and change with that. So we're going to talk even more about that. So thanks for bringing that up, Erica.
Welcome.
So when I think of Maura and Rolando, you're obviously advocates. So you've been users, you've promoted career transitions. So instinctively, you believe in it. So let me ask, if you had to sell it, and maybe you've had to do this with organizations to help people understand why it's important to offer career transition or outplacement, how would you be positioning that? Why is it important? And there may be some on the line who have thought about it or maybe not at all. So Rolando, I'll start with you this time. Why is it important?
Sure. If you're an HR person responsible for stewardship of your culture, I think first and foremost, that's the first thing that I would mention. Because in terms of culture and employee engagement, outplacement really does contribute to the development of those two things, right? So I think Maura mentioned earlier, it's not just how you manage people while they're here, it's also how you manage people while they leave because they're talent. And we would be remiss if we assumed that our people who are currently working are not impacted by outplacement that we do as we exit people, because the reality is, those same people talk. And they know how their colleagues are being treated. And also, the way I also see it is, if you're a proponent of or making a claim that you care about people, you treat people with respect, I think it would be perceived as hypocritical or not consistent if you don't treat people with the same dignity and respect as you consider them leaving. So from a core value perspective, it's really, if you're trying to create a persona of a strong employee culture. A really good employee engagement strategy and just an outplacement strategy is very important. And again, employee engagement, right? The other thing that I'm thinking of is your past clients or people could also be your future clients. And I've seen that time and time again. And it's just good business practice that, outplacement and exiting people is an unpleasant thing. But doing something that would help people in this kind of way will at least minimize the effect and the pain as people leave. And people do have good memories in terms of a positive or a negative experience.
Interesting, Rolando. I mean, you use the word, the values, the corporate, and you used that phrase with me when we chatted this week, that end-to-end experience. And especially for someone like yourself, where your brand is on the shelf or it's through the doors we walk through. Some of our brands are behind the scenes in an operating system, but in either case, it is so important. And you tied into that, the values of the organization should be when you enter and when you leave. That's interesting. So Maura, how about you? What's your perspective on this?
I think everything Rolando said, I echo. I think the reputation of your company, your brand, is everything. And it's that, word on the street reputation, right? And when I think about difficult decisions that have to be made in a company, there are times where people maybe know it's coming. There's times where they're completely caught off guard. And so for me, regardless of those circumstances, even if you know it's coming, you're never ready. That's just a fact. And I think why it helps is anything that will help that employee get through the process and kind of shift their energy from, shock, anger, denial, all those stages of change, and focus on acceptance and moving forward. Anything that helps an employee get there faster is in everyone's best interest. It helps that employee focus on, okay, now what you said, Erica, like, how do I just focus, redistribute this feeling and emotion into my brand story and where I want to go and what I want to do. And the quicker someone can help an employee do that, that's in everyone's best interest. And I can say personally, I can think of examples of employees that in past companies I've worked with, we've had to part ways for whatever reasons. And I'm proud to say there's a whole bunch of them that I'm still in touch with and still connected with. And I think that goes back to people will remember how you made them feel. And if transition services and outplacement services are made available to them, it's a win for everyone, because it reflects well in your company, it reflects well internally and externally. And the other thing I would say, Janice, if anyone's watching who maybe doesn't have this in place in your organization today, is I also believe firmly it has to be something that is not a cherry pick, that you only offer it to certain people. I think you need to be consistent as part of your brand reputation. So even if it's looking at it from a leveling to say, okay, this is what the service offering would look like for individual contributors versus managers, directors, et cetera, it's just being consistent in that, because I think that also is important, because people talk, and if one got it and the other didn't, that doesn't help your brand either, and isn't consistent with what you said, Rolando, around like the values.
Yeah, good point.
Oh, what a great point. And thanks for that reminder, Maura, because it is true. We do meet organizations along the way, and grateful they offer, but as that phrase you use, cherry pick. And I'll sometimes say, well, how come she should get it or he doesn't, or vice versa? And it's hard, and you can understand budgetary constraints, but the key thing Rolando brought up is, as well as that consistency, word on the street. And you use the word reputation as well, Maura, and you opened up with, there are only some things you can control, and you may not be part of that decision, but you can control what it looks like, and that the brand and what people are saying about you. And interesting, I know Erica and I have heard a lot about what people have to say about you after they've left, by the way. And the one thing we know for sure is there is a difference meeting people in our network who have been provided support. So Erica, do you want to share a little bit of that, of how that's resonated with that employee now sitting in your office after they've been terminated?
Absolutely. And you know, both Rolando and Mara brought up some really important points, and I couldn't write fast enough. And one of the most important things, and we've also seen quotes on that, is people will remember how you made them feel. So, you know, bravo to both of you for keeping that in mind as employees are being exited. You know, Janice, I want to step it back a little bit in terms of not just when they come into our office. I think some of the positive feedback that I've had from clients is really from the get-go. So if we are available to do these terminations, whether it's on site, whether it's virtual, one of the things that they fed back to me is how helpful it was to have a coach present on the day of their exit. And why? Because what we really help do is diffuse perhaps a situation that could likely get tense, if you will. But we also, you know, you talk about reputation management. Reputation management isn't just about the organization. It's also about these individuals and how they leave the organization. So in a private meeting after human resources or the hiring manager has introduced us, we take the opportunity to go through some of those pieces. First of all, help them through the emotions of how they're feeling, but really allow them to focus ahead. And I think what's equally important for them and what's been shared with me is the fact that they continue with us. So when you talk about building rapport and trust, it happens right there when we have that private meeting with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Erica, it is true. As they say, when we coach our clients on an interview, we say the interview starts in the parking lot. You know, it starts as you walk through the door, and the exit starts as soon as the message is delivered. Absolutely. Well, and linking into that, Erica, is that exit, that day. So when it comes to conducting these meetings, which can be tough, whether you've done it during COVID or not, what are your strategies or best practices when it comes to conducting the termination meeting? And Rolando, I'll start with you this time. Do you have some best practices?
Yeah, you know what, I think as HR professionals, I'm sure that many people on this call has had to deal with those kinds of difficult things. You know, for me, I've not had to just deal with those difficult things. I've had to deal with them en masse. And so from that perspective, whether you're doing it on a one-off perspective or in large clumps, I think number one, you just need a partner. Because, you know, for me, it's almost like, I used to joke, it's almost like organizing a wedding, because the right people need to be at the right place at the right time. Otherwise, everything could go south, particularly when you're doing mass, you know, in groups, right? And so for number one, you just need someone that could take care of the employee, because your mind as an HR professional is on so many other things. So for me, it's a good way of partnering with someone, because you can focus on the things you need to focus on, and then you know that the personal pieces are going to be managed, and managed well, probably even managed better than you. Because at some point in time, we all need to behave as HR professionals, and we need to be as objective as possible. And sometimes, you know, the outplacement consultant or the coach is there and can do the things that you know, you can't do it that day. So for number one, from a professional perspective, it just makes good business sense in practice. Number two, I think, you know, first and foremost, though, as well, is focus on the employee, right? And again, it goes back to what your organization's corporate values are. But again, just for, you know, keeping dignity and respect of the employee, right? If you put yourself in their shoes, you just need somebody there that you know is not representing the organization, but can be there to listen and a sounding board and all that kind of stuff. It just makes sense, because number one, it's not only to help the employee deal with the shock of the most difficult thing they've had to hear, but also it makes good business sense. I mean, I have had coaches where they help someone who had meltdowns. They help someone, who was angry and diffuse those situations. I've seen situations where, they turned things around and the person was chuckling and smiling and laughing as they left and gave them good perspective. So these people are very skilled in what they do. And I think, from an outplacement perspective, I think, if you claim to have a good strategy around that, it has to be holistic, and it starts at the day that you release someone.
Thanks, Rolando. And Maura, it's been it's exceptional working with you and your team when you've had to conduct these difficult meetings. And I give you a shout out on that, because your meetings have even started prior to the moment where the planning you put into a meeting and the time allowed to even plan. I just have to give that shout out, the details. And when Rolando talks about there's more than just the day they're thinking of. So why don't you share a little more about your best practices around terminations?
Yeah, and they're not mine, they're my team's, right? I mean, we all hold hands on this. And I think, listen, the world of HR, we all know, the answer to every situation is it depends. So my team and I are going to write a book one day called It Depends. And I invite you all to be participants in that book, because every situation is different and unique. But what I would say is, how we think about it on an individual situation when an individual is impacted versus a group, it does depend. On an individual basis, as Janice said, it's all in the prep and the thoughtfulness and trying to put yourself in the mind of that individual and what would they be thinking about, what would be important to them. And as you said, Rolando, people are all different and unique. There's no one size fits all approach. So I think there is a whole bunch of work that goes into just understanding who the person is and trying to anticipate what you think how they might respond. You never get it right, but at least if you give some thoughtfulness to that, hopefully you're prepared for scenario, A, B, or C. So on an individual basis, it's about the prep. But the other interesting thing that I think people don't often think about, and again, for those of you watching that maybe are thinking about introducing this in a more formal way to your company, there's huge benefit for the actual HR team, the internal HR team, and the manager that has to deliver the news. So it's a win-win, because when you have that individual meeting, you don't want transitions in the room. When the original message is being delivered, you want it to be the manager, the HR person, and the individual to deliver the headlines. The value, once those headlines are delivered, is we have the HR person, well, typically the leader will step out, and then the HR manager will spend a couple minutes kind of introducing the talent company, introducing whoever the individual is working with, and then that individual walks in and the HR person walks out. So what it does is it creates this transition literally for the person, first and foremost, for HR and for the hiring manager to kind of feel like there's not this awkward, so now what? It really does act as a bit of a buffer and a transition. So I think that's incredibly valuable for all involved. And as you said, Rolando, I think that conversation, once an Erica walks into the room, it's really about the value of having them on site is Erica's then making that relationship in the moment. And I think that builds instant sort of trust and partnership. So when Erica calls that person, a day or two later, it's not just a random voice on the phone. So wherever you can be high touch in an individual basis, I highly recommend it. On the reverse side, like Rolando, I've been involved in ones we've done on a large scale. Years and years ago, I worked with a company where we closed the distribution center. We literally just closed it and we're moving it, and 100 and something people were impacted. And I would say even in that situation, you can find ways to be high touch. We were thoughtful in that case of the 100 plus people where everyone heard the message together at once. But then there, like you said, it's kind of like orchestrating, a big event. There's all the logistics, but from there, everyone went into sort of smaller pods. And then they went into one-on-one rooms with HR and were introduced to a career coach. So it was kind of layers of communicating, from broad communication to more group, to more individual impact, but you can still be as high touch even if it's a large group. But it's all about the it depends. And the more, for me, the sooner you can get the company involved, the quicker that employee will build trust with that individual.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, sorry.
No, I was just saying, I totally agree. And, I think, and yeah, as you were talking more, I just, flashbacks of big projects that I've had to do where, it's very strategic work, right? As you're planning these things, among other things you have to do. And a lot of the planning involves strategic partners. And it's, I just recall, to your point, just some of the discussions I had in terms of the planning, they were very strategic discussions, and you need a strategic organization that gets it, that sees the big picture and that can contribute to the big picture, for sure.
And that's where we would hope, as your career transition partner, to be that the logistics, the planning, you have to, determine the time, the date, and the people. But when you've got that trusted partner to help you with all of those logistics, and I'm really appreciate you bringing up the size. And a lot of people think that outplacement is only needed on large scale layoffs or terminations groups. But the individual ones are what we've been spoken to, and all levels. So already we've brought up some really key things when it comes to exiting an employee. In other words, everyone deserves the same treatment. And Erica, so we're talking about on-site at terminations, and we do know the value. We are always grateful to be there. It's tough. I'm not giving anyone the impression that we love doing it. The day I love going to a termination is the day I will quit my job. It is the toughest day of my life 30 years later. And I'm sure most HR people are nodding as well. No one wants to deliver the news. But I always look at it as we are there for them. We're supporting HR, supporting an organization brand, supporting an employee when they leave, making sure they leave respectfully. But it's changed. It's COVID. We're talking about being there and sitting down and shaking a hand and handing a tissue if we need to. We still are conducting some terminations during COVID, but they do look a little different, but we're still able to build that trust. So Erica, do you want to share some of the strategies or ways we've been supporting people during COVID?
Well, as you all know, because we're high touch, this really becomes challenging because everything really, with the backdrop of COVID, the terminations have become even more challenging right now. And the one thing, Janice, and I think both Mara and Rolando have already referenced how important it is to be well planned, well organized in order to execute it well. Because I will tell you this, I've already experienced the ones that are not executed well. And, for lack of a better term, I apologize to the audience, it can be a little bit of a shit show. And so at the end of the day, planning the logistics around it. So it does require virtually a strategic creativity and careful consideration. Technology is what it is. So just ensuring even the pieces around technology are important. So for me as a team, our best practices is really about ensuring the preparation has been followed through it. So talking to HR about how they plan to conduct this termination and to ensure all the pieces are in place. We also have to be mindful if individuals don't have technology where you can actually see them, that they have some other mode of communication, such as, a cell phone. The most important thing is to ensure we're connected to them. And I think the last piece, Janice, I want to share in terms of being supported when they're being exited is, as coaches, I know I speak for a lot of our coaches, is once we've met with them that day, we do actually follow up with them that very same day, giving them time to articulate the news to their family if need be. In this situation, they articulate it right away because some of the family members are around, but really ensuring we connect with them within a 24-hour period to do what we call a check-in.
Yeah. And, we bring up technology, and I have sat in on those meetings as well. I've actually been, whether it's part of the meeting, and I think some of the most creative ways has been as soon as the message is delivered, HR delivers package, I'll receive a text on my phone to say, Janice, jump into Zoom. And I jump right into the Zoom, or I'm in the waiting room on meetings, or I could be on the phone. So there are ways that we can still be there. And our questions used to be, do you know their birthday? Is there anything serious going on? Now it's, when I would ask a client, you know, how will you share the news when you get home to your husband or wife? I now say, so have they heard? And they said, yeah, I'm in the kitchen. Okay. Is there anything I can do to help you continue the conversation? It's a different way now, Erica, that we've learned to pivot on ensuring that meeting is going to go as smoothly as possible during this time.
Absolutely. And Janice, I want to add, it's so critical that we have their contact information. I was in a situation where, you know, HR was doing their, you know, talking to the employee, and then the next thing, you know, phones get cut off. So having their contact information is so critical, because as soon as HR says go, I've got their information, and I will track them for sure. So just making sure we have that contact information is critical.
Yeah.
And I think I was just thinking, Janice, about the technology piece. Like I said, I think in person, when we're doing it individually, there's a handoff between HR and somebody from your organization. So even if you were able to do that on Zoom, you know, hand the Zoom meeting over to the transition person, and then you get off the Zoom, it's still not ideal, but at least it creates still that sort of intimate, like it's not 5 people staring me at the screen. It's now me and this new person who apparently I know nothing about, but is supposed to help me. And I think there's ways to kind of do it where it still feels intimate and not, I guess, as little awkwardness as possible.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Maura, you brought up an interesting point earlier. You talked about when you have a team supporting you in career transition and afterwards, the employee tends to move forward a bit quicker. Can you comment a little more on that? And I'm thinking of it from the business point of view. If we have some people wanting to sell this to those, have you noticed, do you believe a potential they may sign off more quickly as they move forward, might mitigate some risk? Can you share a little more about what we need to present to our finance people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, I mean, that is definitely one piece, is that I think, you know, from an efficiency, productivity, and cost perspective, if they can move on quicker, you know, your internal teams are spending less time on potentially, you know, legal fees or time and energy negotiating. So there's that whole just internal efficiencies, but then financial impacts. Because they absolutely do move forward quicker, and so that's just extremely practical to share. And I think the other piece around that is that which is a harder sell for finance around brand reputation, but again, that is a factor that if somebody can find focus their energy on their next act and their next and what they bring and what they have as value, again, they're just not going to be fixated maybe on what happened and more focused on where they're going. But I think that you'll get sign off quicker. I've experienced that myself. The other important thing is a lot of people don't know what career transition is. They have no idea. So I think a big part of in that discussion, I saw one of the things come up on chat, one of the questions, but I think when HR is introducing career transitions, I think you just have to be careful you're not speaking HR talk, that you're explaining in practical terms what that means, because there's all the, you know, HR, we're notorious for our lingo. And I think just really practical terms to the individual to say, look, there's a company that we hire, that we pay for, but they work for you. And their number one goal, you know, is X, Y, and Z. And I think if you can teach your team that's doing this work within your organization, whoever it might be, your HR business partners or whoever's delivering terminations and supporting terminations, having kind of that elevator pitch of of what it is and why it's important, that's also really helpful, because then you can explain it in a clear, concise way. So there's not that awkwardness also then when the individual walks into the room or into the Zoom meeting. There's a little bit of context around, what is this? I don't even know who you are or what this is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love it's the practical best practices. Yes, go ahead, Rolando. Absolutely, I want to hear.
I was going to say, I'm hoping that finance would have been is evolved enough to understand that this is a compelling business cost, right, of severance and terminations. But for me, in extreme cases where they're just new to the game type thing, I typically will just cite them the most recent common law case or precedent that's been out there that measures the risk and say, here's the thing, like, here's what I'm proposing, here's the incremental cost to the severance package, but let's take a look at the most recent common law ruling. Do you really want to go there? And to me, that's compelling enough for them to just kind of back off, in my opinion. I also think, and I've actually had to, unfortunately, work as part of the negotiation team on the other side of the table with someone else's legal counsel. And for me, I think it's not necessarily the one tipping point that will get them to sign, but I think it's really more legal counsel on the other side of the table will be looking for things to make a compelling story on why they're going to make a case against you. And I think it's almost table stakes that if you don't have this, you will be. It's just one bullet point for legal counsel on the other side of the table to say, this is a pretty tough, tough, aggressive severance package, and let's not go for it. So I think it's really more table stakes that if you don't have that, you're more likely to have a more, let's say, combative initial discussion with legal counsel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree, Rolando. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And not only are we your partner when it comes to that meeting and afterwards, I know sometimes I've had clients reach out and say, Janice, help me propose this to those that need the final approval. Yeah. And yes, we have those business cases, those stats that can help your business case to bring forward. So never hesitating. Again, we're a partnership from end to end for you as well. Well, it's interesting. You're talking about career transition and being advocates yourself, end users, as well as offering. So what would you say are some key points, elements, pieces that you should look for? So someone on the line is saying, gee, what should I be looking for in a career transition partner? What might those be? So Rolando, I'm going to start with you on this one, as you've shared, you've recently gone through this too.
Yeah. So for me, I think what's really important, and I've looked at other offerings as well, is this is not kind of a fancy or this is not kind of the category spend in HR that you're looking for automation or fancy bells and whistles. This is pure traditional face-to-face discussion. I think many of the very innovative outplacement organizations are trying to manage cost and be very slick with how they attract new clients by offering these kinds of things. But for me, it's really the traditional, what is the expertise of this organization? Who are their coaches and consultants? Have they earned their battle wounds? Can they speak with experience? Do they have, to your point, Janice and Maura, do they have a wide range of the different types of people that they've worked with and coached along the years, whether it be a junior person to the executive? I think those are, first and foremost to me, a sense of understanding what is the capability and the expertise and the wisdom that this organization provides. I think that's really important. The other thing too is in going back to the trust, and it's a relationship with HR as well, as with the account managers and the business leaders in the organization. And it's someone that you really need to develop a relationship with. So you really need to look at a person or an organization that could really, work with you strategically in these kind of pieces. More often than not, even on a one-on-one perspective, they really should have an understanding of the bigger picture in terms of how important these things are, can provide advice and insights in terms of their past experiences with their organizations and how to execute properly. Many of times I have, relied on them in terms of, okay, so, the risk contingency planning, if this is likely going to happen, if this group of people are going to react this way, how do I respond as an HR professional? And many a time, these, the best firms have opinions and can provide not necessarily, advice or guidance, but just their insights. Here's how I've seen it with other organizations play out.
Absolutely. Thank you. Maura, what do you look for when partnering with career transition?
Well, I think having a key partner is important that's like-minded in their philosophy and approach, because the more you work with them, the more they know your company, your culture, your way of doing things, and that just creates a better delivery and experience for the employees that are impacted first and foremost. Secondarily, I look for a provider that is high touch and relationship focused. Like Rolando said, I think there's a time and a place for on-demand, self-study, self-serve modules. When you've lost your job and you're already probably feeling isolated and vulnerable, sitting at a computer, having to, just use a computer and on demand to figure out your next act, it is not, for me personally, is not what this is about. So I look for a provider. I mean, why I work with your organization, Janice, is you might have those tools as a supplement, but you need that human contact, that person who's going to help lift you out, who's going to help you define your brand, who's going to help you put your stamp on a CV that you feel proud of, who's going to help you get confident and think about your transferable skills. You need that coach, and you can't get that from self-study modules. I firmly believe that there's a time and a place. So for me, it's all about building the rapport. And I can say personally, I shared years ago, I was in transition. The coach I worked with at the time is a dear friend of mine. And that was like, I don't even know, I'm aging myself if I say how many years ago that was. So let's just say a few. But she is a dear friend to this day. I've called her around career advice way after the fact. She's somebody that I say is in my village. And I'm president of her fan club. And that's from over probably, honestly, 20 years ago, 19 years ago. So to me, that's what it's all about, Janice, is it's that relationship building, high touch, and having tools available when and where they need them on demand. But you can't, for me, you need both.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if I can just add, Maura prompted me to think about, as HR people, we sometimes feel that it's, let's just hire an outplacement company. They're gone anyway. What do I care about what their services really are? And I think it goes back to being consistent around your values and culture and, your compassion to the individual. Just because they're leaving doesn't mean you shouldn't be concerned about what they're going to get. And also really at the end of the day, it's your money invested in talent and people, and you want to get a good return on your investment. So if it works for the person, whether or not they're your employee or not anymore, I think it's really good to take a look at the services. And, again, I mentioned the fact that recently I went through a transition and I took it upon myself to be a mystery shopper. It's just, for me, it's all about, if I were in transition, what would I be looking for? To Maura's point, I'm not looking for a fancy app that I can go in and do a self-assessment. I'm looking to talk to someone, advice. I'm having a bad day, or I'm very discouraged, and I need someone to give me perspective. Not necessarily kind of stroke my ego or anything like that, but I just want someone to give me sometimes a swift kick in the pants and hold me accountable. Or I want someone just to give me perspective when my perspective is lost. And so you can't get that from an app or a self-assessment or a fancy fancy tool. It really is a one-on-one relationship, to Maura's point.
Yeah, Rolando, and I'm always pleased to give you a kick in the butt.
Yeah,
We've got some great questions coming in on the chat. We've got about 5 minutes to go through some of these, but one of the questions do refer to technology. So I'm going to pass this to Erica as well. In reaction to our new reality, which is supporting clients through technology and Zoom. So whether Zoom or phone calls, Erica, can you comment just on how we are creating trust, one-on-one, building rapport while still looking at each other from a screen until we can shake a hand or give a hug? Can you comment just quickly on a few things that you're doing to help with that?
Wow. In just a few minutes, I think I can. The most important thing for me is that very first meeting and probably a few meetings after that. In order for me to build trust, I like to see them screen to screen, if you will. So that's one of the first things I encourage, and not just with the first meeting, it's a second and third meeting as well. So I sort of lead the way, but also hold them accountable for that. There is a combination of that. And then when we feel comfortable with each other, we'll perhaps talk by phone. I don't have a reputation of being a stalker for nothing, and I say that very in humor. I am on top of my clients. I think because we're in such a disconnected world right now in terms of, face to face, it's so important for me to be connected to them. So I will send a follow-up email if I haven't heard from them for a while and say, oh, by the way, just checking in to see how you're doing. So my title on my email will say checking in. So those are some of the ways when it comes to technology, I stay connected with them because I think it's really important to do that, is to still encourage that screen to screen.
Excellent. And I might add as well, even just some pieces with the one-on-one is important, but in general, the Talent Co, we immediately reacted with more group meetings. We have professionals in transition, executives in transition. Our webinars are not static. We actually ensure you see each other, you meet each other, you get contact lists. So I'm doing everything but serving you coffee. If I could, I would, which comes right down to events. We hosted even an alumni and holiday party with a panel, being Rolando, who spoke with that as well, talk about paying it forward. So we have a great sense of alumni as well.
Yeah.
Another question that's come in as I look through some of these, they call it more or less the pass off. And I'd love to hear, what are some of the words, whether once you've delivered the news in that termination, either Rolando or Mara, what is the best way to whether encourage or best practice to get the outplacement consultant in the Zoom meeting or in a real meeting? Who would like to tackle that?
I can share. I think it's having that, making sure everyone on your team that's supporting terminations has that elevator pitch ready, as I was talking about earlier, Janice. So sort of the 2 or 3 bullet points about what career outplacement is and the role that you play. So that's often the first part, is before HR will do the transition, they say, so, we work with a company that we pay for, but their sole purpose is to be your coach. And part of what we're offering today is this coach who's going to help you figure out what your next steps will look like, and is going to be there to help you with CV writing, with just a couple headlines, and then you can kind of give a couple sound bites on the company you work with, and then explain, like, again, we pay for their services, but they're here to support you and work with you. And I think that it still takes some people time to sort of process and digest, but then when that person enters the room or the Zoom screen, whatever the situation might be, it's really about doing a quick introduction on who the person is, and something about them on a personal level, introducing the coach on a personal level, and saying, I'm going to leave it to you two to connect and get to know each other. And then you just get out of their way and let them start the relationship.
Yeah.
It's a continuous meeting, isn't it? It's certainly, that's what we encourage. It's not an option. It's a part of the full meeting. And that's when it is, we're grateful when we have those meetings, because it's part of it. Because we know, listen to me, we know they need us. You know they need us. They don't know they need us until they meet us. So We want to be there to help. That's our job. We love people. We want to help them.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Janice, because I think that I have seen that before where you give it as an option. Would you like to speak with? And again, I go back to whether you knew it was coming or you didn't know it's coming, you're still in shock. And so people's brains, they're trying to process, this life-changing information that they've had a minute or two to process. And giving them the option is probably not in their best interest. If you transition and introduce the provider and we introduce you, even if that coach has a 2-minute conversation with the employee, it still gives that employee the chance to put a face with a name. So maybe 2 days later when Erica's sending her check-in email, there's a bit of a connection point. But I agree with you, Janice, that the option of yes or no isn't always a great one because people in shock or in the moment might say no. And then I think it's that much harder for the talent company to build that rapport. Yeah,
I agree. I think, a really good coach will gauge the situation and either push to make the connection and have a long, compelling discussion, or say, okay, this person's not here, so here's my card, give me a call, and end it that way. But I think to your point, like in terms of, I've created, I think in that situation, it's important to be very organized and to have scripts, right? There's going to be so many different people. And I found the best practices, to Maura's point, having the day planned very well in advance, including down to the minutia, the scripts. Managers, I tell them, do not digress from the script. Do not digress from the script. And really the kind of the transition piece that I found effective, and you can use your own words, is really, listen, we care about you. We know that this is a difficult day. We want you to, in the absence of people that are around you right now, we thought it would be best to bring someone, a coach, someone could really be a listening ear that's not with the organization to help you deal with this. Here's the person. You can spend as much time as you want with this individual, but this is also another thing that we're giving you in terms of the start of your next phase. You can, this person can really, if you're ready at this point in time, engage with you in terms of what you can do next. And so in those kinds of words, you can use that kind of piece, but really that's the angle of the message we try to give is, listen, we understand we understand that you need to talk to someone and someone not within the organization, deal with this. We're giving you this option right now. You can spend as much time with them as you want or not.
And just sort of wrapping things up as we are almost to the hour, I will add as well, I love these last few points really speak to, as we move into our winter months, most importantly, we tend to speak to the importance of mental health and wellness. And I truly believe that when you have that objective person to speak to and others, what you offer, you care for them then, now, and in the future, it is a big part of just making sure that everyone is okay. There are some other great questions in the chat box. What I will commit to doing for those, I will ensure we have those. I'll follow up with responses to those. If you want to add a few more as we wrap up, feel free. We can't address them all now. I just am thrilled with having Erica, Maura, and Rolando. Thank you so much for joining us today. Wow, that flies by so quickly. You guys were just a wealth of information, and so grateful and thankful that you could join us here today.
Thanks so much, Janice.
Thanks for inviting us, Janice.
Thanks, everyone.
You're welcome. What
Bye,
I will
everyone.
do is I'm going to pass it back to Marion so she can wrap it up with final words. So I will pass it back over to you. If I can move my screen. There you go, Marion, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. And thank you so much to all of you for joining today's seminar, and especially a big thank you to you, Janice, and our panel for a highly valuable and informative discussion. The Talent Company is pleased to offer our Top of Mind series addressing multiple topics of interest and relevance to today's HR professionals. Please feel free to check out our website and register for our upcoming webinars as listed on your screen. Also as well, please keep your eyes open for today's recording, some helpful summary materials, as well as our event feedback survey, which which will be sent out within the next 2 days. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Stay safe.
everyone.
Bye.
See you
Bye.
later.